And if you've been liking any of the content on here, just feel free to subscribe. Either way, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching.
So this video series is not going to be more on how competitive or how good the army is. It's going to be just how they feel to play and the way they play, really. Things about them, maybe their price, how they are to paint, maybe some other comparable armies, what they look like on the table. Are they fun to play? Now maybe a couple key units. So we'll start with the Custodes. So the Custodes are mostly infantry-based army. You can get some vehicles with the Virtus Praetors. They're like a mounted bike. You can also get some dreadnoughts and such with Forge World and some tanks. But getting into Forge World will cost you quite a bit more. With the Custodes, there are quite a bit of points. And with a high unit cost, it's just one of the more cheaper armies in the game to get into. You can just get a couple patrol boxes, a couple boxes here and there, give you 2,000 points pretty quick. And some comparable armies, there's knights, because they're also elite, but they're big giant robots. There are also the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights are about the closest thing I can think of for unit-wise and just the way the army looks for size-wise on the table. They don't have a lot of units either. They're quite costly. They're elite, and that's why when you hear the term of maybe an army being called elite, it just means that each one of the units or one of the models will cost more points than the average army cost of a model. So I'd say the closest thing would be Imperial Knights and Grey Knights, just for unit cost really and model cost, the elite wise. Generally speaking, about army size, like if you're a person that likes to see a lot of models on the table, the Custodes really aren't for you, just because you're not going to get a lot. I think my list has maybe 30 altogether, and that's with my sister, so I'll kind of talk with them a little bit. It's mostly just these big chonkers on the table, and you don't get a lot of them. They can be fun and they can be boring, I guess, the way I like them, because there's a lot of different tools and you have to play smart with them if you want to play competitive or just keep your brain turned off of them, because you can play just walk up the table, because they're quite tanky. You can just walk up the table tanking hits and hopefully kind of make it into combat. And that's not a knock saying that, playing that way is a bad way. You can play every way you want. But it's also a good army to get into because they can take hits, so you have a more leeway with mistakes. But as a higher competition you go up, the mistakes that you have, the leeway, goes down quite a bit. But just between friends, when beginners, it is a good army just for starting with, because you can learn the rules without paying for your mistakes. Lost the game because of some mistake you didn't even know you were making at the time. Really, your variety of gameplay for these guys, there's not too much. It's pretty much melee. You can get a little bit of shooting with your Forge World. They do have some shooting with their spears, but it's pretty much melee. It's tank some hits, try to be clever with your moves, get into melee range charge. But for shooting, there's not a lot of shooting. There's more shooting than, say, World Eaters. If you're looking for maybe a tiny bit of shooting with some melee, then the Custodes are pretty good. But if you're looking for just straight shooting, being tanky, the Custodes really aren't that. Their detachment rule is the kata, so it's all centered around melee. You can only use it when you're in melee. You can either choose between -1 hit, sustained hits, or lethal hits. And that's your faction rule. Even when the codex comes out and the detachments, they're still going to be melee focused, because that army rule is a melee rule. For the keys to your victory for this army, it's so far in the index, it might change in the detachment, but even then, it is because a lot of your data cards, especially your Custodian Guard, have abilities that interact with objectives. So you are kind of an objective holding army. You interact with a lot of objectives. Right now, you have a fight for stratagem that I can only use if I'm on an objective. So it is an objective-based army. So if you're not the person that likes to camp around on objectives behind walls and kind of think of savvy plays to keep people from seeing them from you, because you don't, like I say, you don't have big, huge units that keep you off the objective. You have a lot of OC. Each Custodian Guard has at least 2 OC. You can add some war gear to add another OC to it to make them 3 each, but you're not going to be able to pile 20 guys on there and keep people from actually standing on the objective. The biggest unit you can get is a 6-man Terminators with a captain attached to it, so 7 is the biggest unit you can get. And the Sisters, I think you can get, there's 10 of them you can make, but the Sisters are not Custodian Guard. You're not going to try to hold an objective of 10 Sisters in the middle of no man's land and hope to survive. So yeah, so it is an army that you are going to have to be savvy, holding on to your objectives, They do have some movement tricks for getting behind their enemy lines. And it's a savvy army. You have to be pretty savvy with it as you get more competitive. But this is not really a competitive video. It is just a video just saying, just how they play. And the way they play is you interact with objectives quite a bit, and you're tanky, and your main focus is melee. And these are what they kind of look like here. You can see in the box art here. And that's kind of what the generic Custodes look is, the gold and red. I've always liked gold and red, so it didn't matter to me to color them the generic color. But as anything, you can color them any way you want. I find they're pretty easy to paint. They're kind of like a Space Marine. You do have some paneling and some highlighting and such, and it depends on your painting level. I do like them because they're easy to paint. I don't like sitting and painting a whole bunch of detail and a big pile of models. This army does quite good for me because you don't have to paint a lot of models, and they're easy to paint, but you can still make them look pretty cool. Good range for painting and collecting, really, because they're cheaper overall to collect a 2,000 point army. How easy is it to find used models? And really, there's not a lot. I find when I've seen people selling these things, these armies, they're either selling their entire collection, and they usually have been collecting them for a while, it looks like. It's usually big collections. You'll never really find someone selling a whole army of Custodes for like $400. Like some of the older ranges, like the Tyranids and the Tau and say the Grey Knights, you can find them cheaper, but a full-size Custodian army plus some extra units are usually going to cost you quite a bit more. But surprisingly enough, it's almost the same price just to buy it for new, and this way you get to paint it yourself for not that much price difference. And the price range for this army, if you were going to buy it new, as you can see here, I have a combat patrol and the boarding patrol. I'm in Canada, so boarding patrol, it says 110 on there, so it was probably about 140 once it got here, taxes and shipped and all that. Really, if you got those two and another combat patrol, so you're looking around $500-600, I think. And that's just to get a flat of 2,000 points on the table. Get them painted up. Don't have to get them painted up. You're just playing with your friends. You're just looking for an army to get into. It's not super important. It's probably about $500-600 Canadian to buy a brand new army of Custodes. And then the lore about these guys, they're just kind of like Space Marines, but better. That's the generic answer. But I like these guys because they're in the lore, they're rare. They're supposed to be incredible fighters. You hear stories and read books of just Space Marines getting killed left and right, really. But a Custodian dying is something big, and they usually don't get involved in this unless it's something big in the story. I just like the look of them. They look like almost like Greek or Roman or some sort of sci-fi warriors. I've read a few of the books with them. I've quite enjoyed them. The Watchers of the Throne series, it's just 2 books. It was a really, really great series. If you're into the Custodes or thinking about Custodes, those are 2 great books. And like I said, I've always liked gold and red, so I've always been attracted to the way they looked. And another one is, are they kind of fun to kit bash? Yes, find different heads. I think my Trajan here has a different head. I think I put some Sagittarium head on him from Forge World with Dark Angel's wings, head, ear things. I have them all on marble bases. This is my Valerian. He is a Custodian character, but he's hard to find the model for. So I kit bashed one out of the Age of Signar. I think he's Sebastian. Can't quite remember what he is, but he's a Age of Signar model. And then I put a fancy spear on him, just because Valerian has a fancy spear named Genosis in the books. He is one of the characters from those books I mentioned, the Watchers of the Throne. So I wanted to get a cool model for him just because I enjoyed the books. So I kit bashed this fella, used Custodian shoulders, the head. So I think he looks cool once he's on a base and everything. Once he's all painted up, he will be a bad man. Then I had these 4 models out here, just for 4 key models, key units. The first one here this is the Custodian Guard, and he is the backbone really of most of these boxes that you'll get, and a lot of lists will have these fellows, and they are one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest model we have just for as a Custodian. They come in units of 4 or 5. Good little unit. I'm not going to go over the stats or anything, just kind of something you'll see in a lot of lists, and it will come in a lot of these boxes. There's a Alaris Terminator. I really like the look of these. They look cool. They are a big key unit as well in most Custodian lists. And then there's the Wardens. They look a lot like the Custodian Guard, The stat line's a lot the same as well. The only difference, you'll see this little robe, but they're a little more tanky, and they'll make it these 3 units are a big key factor to a lot of custodian lists. If you're seeing these cheap and you're collecting Custodes, these would be the ones to collect. And then there's Trajan Valoris. He's the leader of the Custodes right now, the Captain General. He's a great multiplier for any of the units he can join. He can either join your Custodian Guard or your Wardens. He can't join Terminators. Or he's a great little model. And there's another side of the army as well, these Sisters of Silence. They're more of a utility or a complementary side of the Custodes. So they're not going to do your heavy hitting. They're more your secondaries and your home field objective holders. You have these girls with swords. They all are kind of anti-psychic damage, but they're not. You're not going to run up and kind of try to do damage to these things. So they're pretty cheap. I do believe a unit of these for 4 of these is 50 points. And there you can also have the girls with flamers, and they have scout. Only these ones have scout, the flamer girls, and they are also a unit of 4 for 50 points. You can get a unit of 5 for 65 points, 65 points for this as well. And then you have the cheapest one, which are the Bolter Sisters, and you can get a 4 unit of them for 40 points. So you can get a Rhino, you can put them in. Not a lot of people do that. If you're just trying to build just a generic old Custodes list, don't focus on the Sisters, really. In the combat patrol, you can get 10 Sisters that come in that, and that's pretty much all you'll need. Like I said, unless you're really going for a niche, I'm going for Sisters, and this is, your 6th, 7th army or something like that, I wouldn't bother. Just mostly try to get your Custodian units and maybe a unit or 2 of these Sisters just to have on the shelf or just to have in your army just for use and utility. Quickly touch on competitive, just because it's not really the aim of this video. Right now, they're not doing the best, and that's why I don't really want to talk too much about competitive, because you just never know, because this video is going to come out in January. In 6 months now, they could be amazing, because we're due for a data slate this week. But right now, they're not the best in competitive, but like I said, this is more just for how do they play. So hopefully this video has highlighted some of the things about the Custodes for someone that's looking into a new army and is curious about the Custodes but may not know about the game or may not really be into the competitive scene. Is just more curious of just how they play and the way they play. And I hope you all have enjoyed this first video of this series. The next one will either be Tau or World Eaters. Hope you enjoyed this video, the way they play, and thanks for stopping by.